Right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We're going to get started in just about a minute or so. We're going to give people a little time to get in, get settled, and then we'll jump right in. As you're waiting, please feel free to enter in the chat where you are joining us from. Where are you zooming from, as they say? Then I'll do my best romper room impersonation. All right, for those who are just joining, good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning for this very important conversation. As you're joining us, just drop in the chat where you're joining us from. What part of the country, what part of California, what part of the world. And in my best romper room voice, I see Cynthia from New York and Kia from Michigan, Oak Park, Bridget from the Bay Area. Hey, Bridget, I know Bridget. Marissa from San Diego. There's Mike from LA. Alexandra from Florida. Not sure if you're called Alexandra, but I'll just say Alexandra. Grace Sonia Melanio from San Jose. Hey, Grace Sonia. We got Carmen from Anaheim. Angela from Philly. Haley, Indiana. My Midwest home, Midwest neighbor. I'm from Chicago, so Indiana's right across the way. Well, thank you all for joining us this morning and for putting in the chat where you are joining us from, where you're zooming in from. We are going to get started with today's conversation because we know it's going to be very, very fruitful and impactful for everyone that's here. So just starting you off, my name is Antoine Cook. I'm an associate director for AARP here in the California State Office. And we are welcoming you to our fifth installment of our Juneteenth series titled Journey to Juneteenth. This year, our theme is really going to focus on celebrating work and excellence. And so we'll take a deep dive into how Black Americans have impacted the labor movement. Before we jump in, and these will be our presenters this morning, and you'll get a chance to meet them a little bit later as we continue to go through today's session. We are going to go into our meeting agreements, and we have these up so that everyone can have a good experience during the session today. So first one, please keep yourself on mute. That way we take care of any background noise that could disturb the flow of the event. We want people to use the chat as much as possible. You can ask questions, you can put in comments, you can recognize people that you know, use the reactions as well to be able to add emotion virtually to the session as you hear different things from different people. We want to assume everyone's good intents and use respectful language and tone. And then last but not least, please be aware if your camera is on, because if your camera is on, not only are you visible to us, but you're visible to everybody in the Zoom, right? So keep in mind when your camera is on what's going on around you. All right, so with that, we are going to get started. You should have seen a note once you came in saying that the session is being recorded. So if you're just coming in, just hit OK and you should be good to go. Before we jump in, though, we have a couple of polls that we want to put out there for everyone to participate in. And here's the first poll. You should see it popping up on your screen now. How many years have you participated in the Journey to Juneteenth program with the AARP California State Office? How many years? Is this your first time? You've been here all 5 years now, or you're somewhere in between 1 to 5? A few more seconds to let folks add in. First timers, love that. Perfect. First time, 96%. All right. Hopefully this won't be your last because we plan to do this for years to come, as long as we can convince Dr. Jackson to keep coming back. And we have, as you can see here, the results. But we have another poll that we're going to ask you to complete as well. So that poll should be coming up right about, where is it? Oh, let me see. Hold on here. Having some. I don't. Is the second poll up, Marissa? Or no? Okay. Maybe we won't do the second poll. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. All right. So here we go. Poll number 2. What is the definition of excellence? So you got 3 choices: the quality of being good or mediocre, the quality of being outstanding or extremely good, or the quality of low-grade materials. What is the definition of excellence? Folks, a few more seconds. All right, we're going to close it in about 5 seconds. 4, 3. All right, 96% said the quality of being outstanding or extremely good. And that is correct. Perfect. Thank you all for taking time out to participate in those polls as well. And now we're going to get into the session. Throughout the event today, as I mentioned before, we want you to use the chat. So make sure you put in comments, questions, because the questions that you put in chat, we'll be able to come back to them once we get to the question and answer section of today's session. We are eager to hear from Dr. Jackson, but before we do that, if you're not familiar, AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan membership organization for people 50 and over. And we empower people to choose how they live as they age. That's our mission. We encourage people to also age with confidence. And with a nationwide presence, AARP strengthens communities and advocates for what matters to people 50 and over and their families. And that's over 100 million people across the country. And we do that through 3 very important priorities: health security, financial resilience, and personal fulfillment. So again, as I mentioned before, we're eager to hear from Dr. Jackson as well as our panelists. So as you may recall, for folks who said that this isn't your first time, Dr. Jackson has been doing these sessions with us every year, and this is year number 5. If you want to go back to some of those previous sessions, you can always visit our YouTube page, AARP California, and you'll be able to see some of our previous sessions. So with that, I am going to introduce, Dr. Jackson. And now I'm just zipping through slides and making people eyes kind of glaze over. So let's go ahead and get started with introducing Dr. Tanai Jackson. Dr. Jackson is a U.S. historian of the Civil War and Reconstruction era. She focuses on the abolition of slavery and meanings of freedom. Dr. Jackson earned her PhD at the University of Maryland, College Park, and is currently assistant professor of history at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Dr. Jackson is also a native of the San Jose area. So with that, I am going to bring up Dr. Jackson and then give her the floor, if I can actually find her. Here she is, right here. All right, so Dr. Jackson, you are on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Antoine. Nice to see everybody out there today. Thinking about the AARP values that Antoine just went over, today's definitely on financial resilience. So I'll just start us there a little bit. Before I get started, I also just want to call everyone's attention to the chat. We encourage everyone to post questions, comments while we're in process here today. So you can use the chat to and interact with my presentation. Okay, let me share my screen for you. I have a few slides to walk us through. Okay. Okay, how's the presentation look good for everybody out there?
Looks great.
Yep. Okay, fantastic. Okay, I see that we have a lot of first timers too. So some of you may not remember some of the past presentations we've given where I sort of outlay what exactly Juneteenth is. But when I was last talking to y'all, talking about the meaning of Juneteenth, I was talking about freedom as a process. And talking about how Juneteenth was a celebration of that process and the Black people that made the war about abolition during the Civil War. It was Black folks that made the war about abolition, fought for the United States, and were there at the last battle of the Civil War in Galveston, Texas, that ensured the survival of the United States and the passage of the 13th Amendment that you see here in the slide, that abolished race slavery in the nation for good. Black people were not allowed to serve in the United States Army until 1863. They were also some of the last soldiers to muster out because of that. Last in, last out. So at that final battle, 2 months after Appomattox, when we generally attribute the end of the war, Black soldiers were there, an army of liberation. Juneteenth, the celebration of June 19th, when the U.S. troops, including the 31st, 25th, and 29th United States colored troops, arrived in Galveston and ended the war for good. But what then? If this is our sort of moment where we celebrate the end of slavery, what happens after that? Freedom came with nothing but freedom, sometimes without even the clothes on your back. Former slavers claiming ownership of every last thing they could. Freedom had not been defined. One of the reasons we call Juneteenth a freedom holiday is not only because of the abolition of slavery, of course it is, but also because the abolition of slavery forced us as a nation to define freedom. What does it mean to be a free American? At first, no one knew if Black people, especially those who had been enslaved, would become citizens. Would they? If so, would Black people have the same rights as white people? Would they? What about the vote? What about property ownership? All of these were very real questions being debated in Congress, and they would be hashed out in the years to come. But even before abolition, living in a society in which slavery was defined as Blackness, Black Americans knew that the ownership of one's own labor was the central feature of freedom. And we see this in Black abolitionist thought. Perhaps my favorite for talking about, wage labor and the free market even before abolition is Frederick Douglass. He uses it as one of his most persuasive arguments in his abolitionist autobiography. After escaping slavery, he says, I was a slave, I got a paycheck, right? He writes, I found employment the third day of my arrival in stowing a sloop with a load of oil. It was new, dirty, and hard work for me, but I went with it with a glad heart and a willing hand. I was now my own master. It was a happy moment, the rapture of which can be understood only by those who have been slaves. It was the first work, the reward of which was to be entirely my own. There was no Master Hugh standing ready the moment I earned money to rob me of it. 1845. Likewise, the American League of Colored Laborers, the ALCL, was the first Black American labor union. It was formed in New York City in 1850, 11 years before the start of the war, as a collective for skilled free craftsmen and sought to develop agricultural and industrial arts skills among its members. It encouraged African American business. Frederick Douglass helped organize the union in response to the difficulty Black laborers had in joining white unions. On June 13, 1850, the organization assembled for its inaugural meeting. It appointed New York Minister Samuel Ringgold Ward as president, Henry Bibb of Michigan as secretary, and Douglass vice president. Notably, All three of these men were known more for their work to abolish slavery than their efforts on behalf of the working class. But this shows this connection I'm making between labor and liberty. The union resolved to create a bank that would provide credit and encourage saving, and a fund to provide loans to Black entrepreneurs and plant an industrial fair for the second week of May 1852. 70% of the proceeds going to exhibitors, 30% to the union. Black economic success was a major platform among Black activists in the decades leading up to the Civil War. In the records of the colored conventions, which I encourage you all to look at, and I have a little QR code up there in the corner if you want to visit this database of primary sources from these records, they were a series of meetings of Black delegates elected locally from around the free states, and including many who had escaped the horrors of slavery and now fought for its demise. These records are excellent. After California became a state in 1850, there was a rush of free Black people into the state, looking, like many migrants, to fulfill dreams of gold. Despite its relatively small population, California had 3 state conventions in the 1850s. At the state convention in Sacramento in 1855, organizers sought to hold California accountable as a free state. They write, "Brethren, your state and condition in California is one of social and political degradation, one that is unbecoming of a free state. The issue was over whether Black people could testify on their own behalf in a court of law, but they used the market to make the case. In this state," Reverend Darius P. Stokes of the Business Committee addressed the meeting, "there are over 3.5 million of property owned by the colored population. For this, several $1,000s of tax is collected each year. We own mining claims valued at $30,000 per share. We have every advantage for unfolding whatever talent we may possess. The message? Despite blatant economic obstacles, Black people were flourishing in California, and yet Black Californians were denied the equal right to compete." By the time of Juneteenth, now free, liberation was already tied to labor. In one famous account, former Confederate Colonel P.H. Anderson wrote to Jordan Anderson, formerly enslaved on his plantation, trying to convince him to come back and work. He starts off his letter with a friendly and polite tone, but his sarcasm, it's unmistakable. Dayton, Ohio, August 7th, 1865. To my old master, Colonel P.H. Anderson, Big Spring, Tennessee. Sir, I got your letter, and I was glad to find that you had not forgotten Jordan, and that you wanted me to come back and live with you again, promising to do better for me than anyone else can. I have often felt uneasy about you. I thought the Yankees would have hung you long before this, for harboring Rebs they found at your house. I suppose they never heard about your going to Colonel Martin's to kill the Union soldier that was left by his company in their stable. Although you shot at me twice before I left you, I did not want to hear of your being hurt, and I am glad you are still living." But it is when he's talking about his money that the snark is on full display. "As to my freedom, which you say I can have, there is nothing to be gained on that score, as I got my free papers in 1864 from the Provost Marshal General of the Department of Nashville. Mandy says she would be afraid to go back without some proof that you were disposed to treat us justly and kindly. And we have concluded to test your sincerity by asking you to send us our wages for the time we served you. This will make us forget and forgive old scores and rely on your justice and friendship in the future. I served you faithfully for 32 years and Mandy 20 years. At $25 a month for me and $2 a week for Mandy, our earnings would amount to $11,680. Add to this the interest for the time our wages have been kept back, and deduct what you paid for our clothing and 3 doctor's visits to me and pulling a teeth for Mandy, and the balance will show we are in justice entitled to. Please send the money by Adams Express in care of V. Winters, Esquire." You can see that already, just days after abolition, that people are already talking about their money in this extent. Men and women who worked in trades dependent on tools and other property did find themselves in a particularly precarious position after abolition, though. Because enslaved people had been prohibited from legally owning property, Attempts to retain property, particularly the property of their trades, was difficult to impossible. Confiscation of property acquired during slavery targeted skilled and semi-skilled Black workers, choking off the new Black working class. Ben Moore had erected a tar kiln on the property of his former master, with the master's consent. But now he complained to the Freedmen's Bureau that the former master claimed the kiln. Both men agreed that Ben Moore had built the kiln. But in the absence of legal recognition of the verbal agreements of the slave system, courts ruled against Ben Moore. When Wilmington wheelwright Duncan Holmes went his own way after emancipation, he took with him the tools of his trade. His former master had him arrested for larceny. Holmes bought the tools with his own earnings while enslaved, but New Hanover County, North Carolina authorities agreed with the former master, and Holmes was indicted. Undeterred, Holmes sued his owner for his tools again upon his release. He lost, but policy matters. In 1868, a year after the Reconstruction Acts paved the way for Black men to hold political office, elected Black Representative Abraham Galloway sponsored legislation protecting property acquired by slaves prior to emancipation. The convention approved the ordinance by 101 to 4. Now people could protect their tools and their work and their labor. Of primary importance to this first Juneteenth generation was the ownership of land. In some areas, folks pooled resources together to buy land. During the war, plantation owners regularly fled when the United States Army approached, particularly along the coast. In many cases, the formerly enslaved workers continued to work the land as free people, completing the crop and selling it after the harvest. This is where the origins of this 40 acres and a mule stem from. It's this military reality where in the field, commanders gave this land to people who were working it in a sort of early homesteading way. The trend continued after the war on abandoned lands across the South, but not long after the war, the federal government returned the land to the previous owners. But the decision to pool resources to buy Black-owned farms continued. Fayetteville, Tennessee, August 8, 1865, less than 2 months after Juneteenth, less than 6 months since slavery had fallen in the state of Tennessee. Freedmen's Bureau agents write, 3 families numbering 14 souls, they have managed to procure by purchase and otherwise about 70 head of hogs, large and small. They have also about 55 acres of corn and about 30 acres of cotton with a very flattering prospect of a fine yield. Kinston, North Carolina, August 7th, 1865. Signed by 3 men calling themselves a committee of freedmen. Anthony and Ezekiel Blunt and James Hargate planned a community of homesteads. Be it further resolved that we raise $10,000 for the purchase of homesteads, and that the said sum be raised by 1 January 1868. And further, this society shall be composed of the best and most reliable freedmen in the county. And further, it is proposed to raise the required sum in the manner following. 250 men will compose the company, each to be assessed in the sum of $48 per annum, to be paid monthly in installments of $4. Some looked west. Allen Allensworth was born into slavery in Kentucky in 1842. Like many, he escaped during the Civil War when the Confederacy sent slave patrols away to fight for slavery. Allensworth joined the 44th Illinois Volunteers, United States Army. He became the highest commissioned Black soldier in the United States military, reaching the level of lieutenant colonel after the war. He served as chaplain to a Black unit in the West. Having gained equality on paper through the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, but not in practice, many saw the solution in what they then called freedom colonies. Dependent on the mutual purchase of land, these freedom colonies were predominantly, if not exclusively, Black towns with Black governments and Black business. Among the most well-known of these are the Mound Bayou in Mississippi, the towns established by the Exodusters in Nicodemus, Kansas, and the community in the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma. But there were hundreds of these that popped up across the country. By the 1890s, Allensworth, now living in Los Angeles, turned his eye toward Tulare County, the San Joaquin Valley's promise of perfect farmland. Allensworth envisioned the town that carried his name as a community of independent Black farmers. Allensworth was not just about the independence of the town itself. It was an attempt to establish a larger Black economy, Black capitalism. The town was on an established railway stop, opening up commercial opportunities. Allensworth's vision was that the town would sell their produce to growing Black urban communities in Los Angeles and the Bay. Today, the town is a California state park, and it's well worth a visit. At the same time Allensworth is being formed, there is a boom in Black banks, again demonstrating the prioritization of Black economic health. Between 1890 and 1915, there are 200 Black banks that sprout up in the United States. This first generation, this first Juneteenth generation, as I'm calling it, prioritized Black economic health. Black-owned banks were nothing new. Many sprouted up to meet the economic demands of the Reconstruction era. Maggie Lena Walker's St. Luke Penny Savings was one of the most successful. Because white-owned banks were reluctant to accept deposits from Black organizations, Black business relied on these banks. Walker was just 14 when she joined the local council of the Independent Order of St. Luke, a mutual aid society founded in Baltimore in 1867 by formerly enslaved Mary Prout. At the time, it provided life insurance, burial benefits, and care for the sick, the elderly, and destitute. The bulk of investors at St. Luke were working women. And this really speaks to this point about setting up financial institutions and structures which can support Black economies. It was in 1903, just as Reconstruction was ending and Jim Crow began to take hold, that Walker formed St. Luke. Later, it merged with two other Black-owned banks to become Consolidated Bank and Trust, in 1931, with Walker serving as chairman of the board. It was the oldest continuously operating African-American owned bank in the United States, operating for over 100 years before its purchase by Abigail Adams Bank, turned Premier Bank, and now the People's Bank since 2021. Okay, what do we make of all this? It's a sort of interesting thing to think about, like Black entrepreneurial citizenship, this sort of capitalist citizenship or consumer citizenship that we talk about. The idea that there are Black dollars to be spent and there is Black wealth to be earned in some ways propels the civil rights movement to come later in the 20th century. By 1968, when Martin Luther King Jr. delivers his mountaintop speech, he focuses on the wealth consolidated and earned by Black Americans since abolition, since Juneteenth. And he says to the crowd, now the other thing we'll have to do is this: always anchor our external direct action with the power of economic withdrawal. Now, we are poor people. Individually, we are poor when you compare us with the white society in America. We are poor. Never stop and forget, though, that collectively, that means all of us together, collectively, we are richer than all the nations in the world with the exception of 9. Did you ever think about that? After you leave the United States, Soviet Russia, Great Britain, West Germany, France, I could name the others, the American Negro collectively is richer than most nations of the world. We have an annual income of more than $30 billion a year, which is more than all of the exports of the United States and more than the national budget of Canada. Did you know that? That's power right there, if we know how to pull it. I would like to end my presentation today there, but I'm really excited to bring in our panelists and talk to them a little bit more about this. I would like to think about the changes and the profound changes that we have undergone since the civil rights movement, and especially these new realities now in the 21st century. How do we go from Martin Luther King's mountaintop to where we have come since then? Thank you, everybody. I'm going to end my presentation so that we could bring in our panelists and kick off this conversation. Oh, I'm seeing some of the comments in here about slides of what I'm saying. Okay, I'm going to bring in our panel now. Today we have a special panel who will enrich our conversation. Remember that AARP remains focused on livable communities for all ages and across all communities. To learn more about this, visit www.aarp.org/livable. And there you will learn about the 9 domains of livability. One of those domains is jobs and work. This morning, our 2 panelists will help us dive into that domain in relationship to the history of Black Americans and Juneteenth. First, let me welcome Vakita Poindexter, who wears many hats in the professional entrepreneurial world. Vakita, welcome.
Well, thank you, Dr. Jackson. Let me tell you, that was phenomenal. I had to pull out my little pad and paper and take some copious notes. So can't wait to get your slides. But thank you for having me. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in on this beautiful Friday morning. I am Vakita Poindexter. I am the founder and CEO of Poindexter Consulting Group. We are a full-service human resource consulting firm that is headquartered here in beautiful California, Temecula, California. We operate in multiple states within the United States, and then our goal is to be nationwide. We offer services in every language because HR is applicable, whether you speak English, Japanese, Chinese, or Spanish. I have been in business now for 25 years. It'll be 26 years in January. One of the other things that I like to be able to do other than my, everyday work, which is insurance compliance for our organizations, making sure that employees are being treated fairly within the workplace, is making sure that, I have a seat at the table where decisions are being made. So I'm currently the board president of Grid Alternatives Ellen Empire. I am blessed to be able to sit on the beautiful council of AARP as an executive council member, because once you are more mature, right, not older, and you're that over 50, we want to make sure that things that we're doing, whether it's workplace or anything else, is inclusive of that as well. I'm the chair of the California Department of Insurance Diversity Task Force, making sure that people of color have a seat at the table, especially women. I also am a member of the COPRAC committee. I tell you all of this, and we'll get into this conversation a little bit later, is if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. And so when I sit at these tables, I am making decisions or helping make decisions that will continue the trajectory of what we have done as African Americans in the past. So again, thank you for having me, and I look forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't wait to talk. The next, we will have David Crippens, who has an extensive background in workforce and small business development. David, welcome.
Well, thank you very, very much. And Dr. Jackson, that was an excellent presentation. I learned a lot myself. I've been around for a long time. I have just recently left or retired from the City of Los Angeles Workforce Development Board. I was on there for 29 years. I helped to start an organization called Unite LA around 26 years ago, which deals with careers and education. And my life has been devoted both to jobs and to education. I also want to go back and look at your last slide. I was there with the March on Washington in 1963. I was also fortunate that my 3 generation great-great-grandfathers on both sides, mother and father's side, on my mother's side, were in the Civil War. But more than anything, I've been dedicated to work. How can we succeed as African Americans in the workplace? And that is more important as we move on now. And I also want to say, as we go further, my comments relay back as I think of my grandchildren who are 20 and 25, of their sojourn into the workforce. My granddaughter is at Tuskegee and wants to be a veterinarian. My grandson is really beginning his career in whatever he wants to do. This is important for us. And going back to the theme of where we started, is excellence. It's what is going to be demanded of us more and more as we move forward. And the last comment is the importance of Juneteenth is that it said to us that our people were willing to do whatever it took to succeed for themselves and future generations.
Thank you so much. Thank you, David. That was lovely. Okay, let's bring Vakita back in and have this conversation here. Welcome, both of you. It's great to have you today. Let's use this topic of excellence to just jump right into it. What could each of you just talk to us about what excellence in the workforce means to you? And we can pick up from there.
Keita, of course, start.
Okay.
You got the best.
Absolutely. So when we talk about excellence within the workforce, I have the honor and privilege to be able to hire, train, develop, coach individuals that are in the workplace, right? And so it's extremely important how we show up, right? And so when I think of excellence, because as African Americans, I don't believe in mediocrity, right? I believe that everything that we do should be of excellence. How we show up for, how we put together the resume, how we handle the interview process, if we're prepared throughout the process. When we have the position, are we showing up on time? Are we being consistent? Are we doing our very best? Or are we just there to be able to get a paycheck? So when I think of excellence, I think of what do I need to do as an individual to ensure that everything that I'm contributing to an organization from an employee perspective is going to be advantageous, right? Because that will determine the trajectory of my particular career path. We also have to be able to understand this too. Jobs are assignments. And so what is your assignment on that particular job, right? And so what is it that you can give, but what is it that you are receiving? And so I think that's extremely important that when you are looking at where you are going to position yourself in your career path, what organizations are you aligning yourself with? Does it fall within your own personal mission and vision statement? If you don't have one, you should probably create one. I love the fact that Dr. Jackson used Dr. King, right? And my mother marched with Dr. King. I love the fact that his I have a dream speech. But what is your I have a dream for yourself? Have you created that for yourself? Because that will help you understand how you want to be perceived, received, and what your standard of excellence is going to be.
Yeah.
Keita said it so well. I'm going to take it just a little further. As I was coming up, my parents and my play uncles and aunts always said, to get in, and I came up in a segregationist era in Nashville, that you have to be better than others. You have to seek to excel. Now, life has changed in all those years, but we're now in chaotic times to where this thing of what has been said before, we have to have that standard of excellence. That's how we, our grandchildren, our children, nephews, and nieces will get ahead. Let me just bring out some things here. As we move forward, one will be in a workforce that you will have, a person will have 3 or more careers, 15 or 20 more jobs in their work lifetime. The average person moving forward will be coming out of the workforce at 71, 72, if they want to have some form of retirement. To be and to do that means that one has to be excellent. And especially those who look like us, who've usually been the last to be hired and the first to be fired, that we must be excellent. This is no wives' tale now. This is just true stuff right now.
This is such an interesting conversation. I mean, some of this makes me think of, having a pride in labor, right? I mean, some of the things I was thinking about when I was putting together my presentation and this talk about excellence is like, how do we foster this pride in work, like a pride in one's labor? That there's a sort of, working class integrity, if you will. I don't know what to say about that, but what do you both think about fostering? It's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, how do we foster that kind of pride and excellence, pride in labor, pride in working in communities?
Go ahead, David.
Of course, please go.
Well, first of all, I think it starts with us as individuals, right? And I think David said it correct, right? I know I'm an only child, and I was raised by, a mom that had her PhD in education and was a stickler for excellence, right? And so I've modeled that pattern for my children. I'm modeling that pattern for my granddaughter, who's 3. so it has become a lifestyle for me. And so not just in the work that I do, but in the communities that I serve. I am very strategic about what boards I sit on, what commissions I sit on, what philanthropic work. It's not about the title, it's about the work, right? And I will be perfectly honest with you, when I was coming up and I was being dragged around to all of these events, I was like, I am never doing any of this. This is too much like work, right? But here I am, right? Understanding the mantle has been passed down. And so when we look at our history, when we look at unions, which was started by Black women, when we look at, as you so eloquently pointed out earlier, the trajectory of where we come from and where we are today, we can't help but to model excellence, because anything else is expected of us, right? There's an expectation that we won't do well. There's an expectation that we will fail. It's an expectation and a desire, if we'll be perfectly honest, that we won't contribute to society. So we have to change that mindset, but we have to change our mindset. We have to understand and know who we are, where we come from, and where we're going. And so I think that that is the first step. I think that we can't get all discombobulated with what's going on now. I think, because this is not our first fight. This, like the younger generation says, that's not our first rodeo. We've been here before, right? How we show up now is even more important. And so I think that we have to maintain our composure, maintain our grace, still get into some good trouble, right? Because good trouble is necessary, but how we get into that good trouble, you can still do that with excellence in the communities that you show up for, and the work that you are doing, right, and even with the jobs that you have or the businesses that you run.
This is so beautiful in what has been said now. I think about it is, it comes down also to talking to our young people about what excellence means. There is an untold thing that has sort of spread, and Bakita said this, that our young Black folks don't really want to work. They're not really good on the job. Now that I hear by being on my boards and all of that. That's not true, but it's incumbent upon us to talk to our young people about what does excellence mean, to talk about what did we do right, what did we do wrong. I can think about times when I failed in the workforce because I was a fool, acted a fool, and should have been fired, but I wasn't, by the grace of God. But I also looked at times that I was able to excel because I had to push myself further and further. And remember, this is what my grandparents said, son, you have to be better. You have to do better. You have to work harder. So from that, I'm an early riser because I felt if I was out there before anybody else, if I opened up the doors, then I was showing that I was excellent. And that also goes to the other thing, which I implore everyone on. Be on boards. Be there, open the doors on boards, close the door when people leave, be at every meeting. Because our value, what we bring is so, so, so important. But going back is that we have to exhibit excellence in every day. Is that fair? No, but that's what we have to do.
And if I could just jump in here for a second, on one of your slides, David, that was so huge, because on one of your slides, I think it was Miss Walker, she was 14 years old, 14. And in the words of Aaliyah, age is just a number. I think that's who said that song, right? If there's some millennials on here, correct me. But we have to change that particular mindset, whether we're 14 or whether we're 64, right? And I understand that once we get to a certain age, we feel as though we put in our work. But in actuality, we have so much more wisdom that we can be able to impart into this generation. But even as parents, as grandparents, we always talk about generational wealth. Well, let's talk about generational knowledge, because that's a part of wealth. We got to be able to spread that knowledge to our young people. And one of the frustrating things that I see from an HR perspective is you have young people coming into the workplace that may have a degree or two and believe that they need to be the CEO. And it's like, you got You may have more degrees than a thermometer, but you got to have some experience. You have to have some experience. You have got to be willing to listen to what other people are saying. The other piece of it is, David said it, he failed multiple times. Failure is an event, not a person. If you don't fail, you will never succeed. And we've got to instill that into our children because that's our next generation. But I think most of us also have to embrace that and be able to understand that too. So I think, those two components is really as equipping and preparing our children and our children's children to not just be focused on generational wealth, because if you have the generational knowledge, you will accumulate the wealth, right? And also what he said is getting on boards and commissions where decisions are made. And so that is one of the biggest things that we need to be able to do. And you can do that at 18, at 19, at 20, or 60, 65, 70, because there's a tremendous amount of knowledge, and that intergenerational mixture is crucial for us if we're going to continue, because we will continue to succeed.
This matter, and to let our young people know what it means, also to understand who they are and what they are. I would also beseech in getting on boards, be a mentor to someone. I still, in my 80s years, and I'm 83 now, I still believe in mentorship and really seek out young people that I may know something that they may want to know. I might have gone through something that they are looking at. One of the things that I did, because I was in, say, the first that came in the 60s, and because I was in public television and I was able to be promoted into various sectors and so forth. And one of the things I always wish for, which now we have because we could be mentors, is someone that I could call who looked like me, and they could say, and I could ask them, did they do that to me because I was Black? Or did they do that to me because I was a fool? And that's what mentorship is so needed. And that's what we can provide, no matter what our age, no matter where we've been. And Ms. Poindexter said it very well when she said that passage of generational knowledge in some ways is as important as generational wealth.
Yes. Thank you both so much. Just an amazing conversation there. Let's talk a little bit about Black entrepreneurship. What resource, I guess this is a two-part question. One is, what do you see as some of the opportunities out there for Black entrepreneurs? And I guess the second part of that is, what support and resources are available for Black entrepreneurs?
Well, I don't think there's any limitations to being an entrepreneur, right? I think being an entrepreneur, and just in my personal opinion, because I'm one, is the way to go. I've done both, right? I worked in corporate America and was forced into entrepreneurship because I had a kid that wasn't expected to live to be 10. And corporate America said, you can't be there. And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna take care of my son. So I'm gonna do what I know and then, jump into entrepreneurship. I think that entrepreneurship is the way to go, right? Now, granted, it is not for everyone. However, we all have, as African Americans and people of color, we all have had what we call a side hustle, right? But how do you turn that passion into a profit? And I think the problem is we need to be honest with ourselves when we don't have the knowledge, right? Because we perish for a lack of knowledge. And we have to be willing to obtain that knowledge. So I don't care if you're in HR, I don't care if you're a plumber, I don't care if you're a gardener, I don't care if you sell candles, I don't care what it is, it's a business. But how do you turn that into a profit? And where are the resources? Well, there's a tremendous amount of resources, right? You have funding institutions, right, that are not traditional bankings, that are called CDFIs, that really specialize in helping the underrepresented communities. Now, I don't like that term, but that's the reality. That's basically saying you can't go to the bank as a person of color and get a traditional loan because as soon as you walk through the door, they're going to judge you. However, these CDFIs have the same access to capital that they are looking for people of color. So that's one. Be able to reach out to individuals that are successful. Mentorship, right? John Hope Bryant, you know, his mission is to create 1 million Black entrepreneurs by the end of 2026. Free resources, ability to, you know, sell your products and services on Shopify. So the resources are there. You have to be willing to do the work. You have to be willing to take a chance and know that it's not for the faint at heart. You're gonna fail, but like a child, when a child is learning to walk, they fall down, but they get right back up. You got to get up and you got to keep going and you got to keep trying. And at some point in time, you got to be willing to change that into a legitimate business, meaning corporation. Should you be an LLC, a S Corp? Do you need to hire employees? What about the insurance? And the first thing I hear when I mentor people coming to the entrepreneurship is, I don't have the finances. Well, most entrepreneurs don't have the finances, right? But that shouldn't stop you. So I think that if we really want to start talking about generational wealth, it is entrepreneurship. It is not working on a job for 30 years with a 401k that will deplete depending upon the volatility of the job market. And that's something that you can pass down to generations.
I cannot add more than what was just said, except as we're talking about entrepreneurship, I think about my grandmother, Miss Sharp, in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I didn't really go and understand what it was, but Miss Sharp and her father-in-law used to buy property and trade property among each other. Miss Sharp sold girdles in Knoxville. And that Miss Sharp was able to make sure that her daughter went to Knoxville College, which was my mother. Now, that slipped a generation because I came up during the time when it was told to get a safe job. So my thing that I did, I went into, how do you get a safe job? I got a master's in social work. And I was going to, because that was the safe job, preachers, lawyers, and whatever, the safe jobs. We're now moving into where we must have that side hustle, or I'm going to leave it just like this, make a way out of no way.
This is so great. Those were deep answers right there. Okay, let me ask another couple of questions here. What is we've talked about a few things here, and especially talked about, you know, there are different opportunities of different ages. What is your advice for people of all ages trying to manage their economic health?
I'm like Nike, just do it, right? You gotta start somewhere. You have to start somewhere, right? And again, it goes back to getting that knowledge. Where are you going to get that knowledge from, right? You have to have trusted advisors. And that's with anything that you do, right? If you're in a room and you're the smartest person in the room, your room is too small. So you need to be in a room where everybody is a little bit more smarter than you. And I like to say a whole lot smarter, because I want to be able to glean from those individuals. We have some phenomenal financial advisors that are African-American, right? Lean into those particular resources to be able to understand what your options are. When you're talking about retirement, it's just not a 401k, or if you work for a nonprofit, it's just not a 403b, right? There's other things that are available to you, like, you know, an index universal life insurance policy that you can start for your grandkids currently and build over years, right? Most people don't understand that. Most people think that that's just a life insurance policy. I'm like, nope, you can build off of that. So I think you need to be able to get the information, get the knowledge, get the education that you need to be able to do that. Entrepreneurship is definitely the way to go, right? You're gonna work hard in life, whether it's a corporation or for yourself. My philosophy is that if I'm gonna work this hard, you best believe I'm going to do it for myself, right? Because not only that, I am going to also pour into others. My team that works for me, I pour into them. I try to help them understand financial wellness. I try to help them to understand home ownership. I try to help them understand buying property, right, and leaving it for generations. But you got to be willing to go get the knowledge. And most importantly, not be ashamed that you don't know. All of us will tell you We didn't know. We had to get the information from somebody, but we took a leap of faith and we did it. And so that's when I say, just like Nike says, you just got to go do it. You have to do it.
You know, so well said. I'm sitting here laughing to myself. I sort of blundered into things. I was very fortunate to have a wife who didn't blunder, who did think about economic things. And my father was that way, and he was fortunate to have my mother who thought about economic things and talk about what do you do when we get to retirement and so forth. I would also say, in looking at this, that one has to be aware that if we have been sort of in those safe jobs, as I was, whatever, and things went well, that life isn't like that anymore, that one has to begin very early to say, what happens, what do I want to be when I reach a certain age, when I won't be in the world of work? Because the retired pension system that we now know it ain't there anymore. There's only left to school systems and to state governments and to governmental entities, and that may change over the years. The importance of understanding what's out there economically, I just cannot, in my later years, saying it becomes even more important. So start young, have your young people start young. That's that generational knowledge that Vikita talked about. That's what becomes even more important as we go on.
But if I could just jump in here, it's ideally, yes, right? If you are parents and grandparents, instill this information into your children. But if you are over 50, it's not too late. It is not too late. If you're over 60, it is not too late, right? And so don't think that you missed the mark or I can't do it or this, that, and the other, because we're seeing government jobs where people have been on jobs 20 or 30 years and now they're cut, no benefits, no 401k, no, none of that, no retirement, you know, we're looking at whether Social Security is going to be cut. And so we have put our lives in other people's hands. And so now we need to take that back, right? We need to take that back and be in charge of our own financial wellness, our own health, our own career path. Like we have to take that back and not let it be so dependent on somebody else. And so if you're over 40, if you're over 50, if you're over 60, it's not too late. You know, you still have to be able to go get the knowledge. You might have to, you know, speed up the process a little bit versus a 20-year-old, but it's never, ever too late. I am mentoring individuals that have been laid off in jobs that are 50, 60 years old, and they're stepping into entrepreneurship. And so, and they are moving quickly. And so don't give up, don't quit, right? Don't get discombobulated by whatever you see that's going on currently. You know, that is all a distraction. So stay focused and you can still be able to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Inspirational. I want to make sure we have some time for questions from the audience out there. So let's open it up and see what kind of questions we have from the audience there. I believe we're going to get those questions asked to us from Marissa.
Hi, yeah, we just had a couple small questions from the audience. One was if you can share your slides after
Sure.
Dr. Jackson, is that something we can send that out along with the recording to this presentation will be shared, and Vikita put together a lot of resources as well, so we'll be sharing all of that after this event. And then Cynthia had a question specific to the park that you mentioned, and I did put that answer in the chat as well. That's the Colonel Allensworth State Historic Park. So if anybody had a question about that. Otherwise, I think we will keep going with some of our other questions, which I just lost. There we go. So one of the questions was, what are some of the policies, bills, legislation that can have a significant impact on Black Americans in the workforce, whether that's employees or employers?
I'll take that. All of them. All of them, whether you're a business owner or you're an employee, right? And so when you're talking about employment laws or public policy, that's going to impact us. You know, we're in California. And so California typically changes the dynamics of their employment law in January and in July. And so all of them, you need to be aware of all of them. You need to have personal relationship with your elected officials where you live, meaning they work for you. So contrary to what you think, they work for you. Show up, let them know what's important to you as a employee, as an employer. In California, it's difficult to do business as an employer because the laws are restricting you from being able to do certain things. As an employee, California is more of an employee-friendly state, right? It's more to protect the employees. And the reason why is there were employers that were out there that didn't, I'm trying to be nice, didn't do their due diligence, didn't treat their people right. Yeah. Right. They treat their people right. And so when you don't treat your people right, what happens? People sue. And then as a result of lawsuits, then, your elected officials start to see, okay, we need to change this, that, and the other. The other thing is people are going to their elected officials and complaining about employers. And so that's another thing, employment treatment. That's another reason why some of these laws are created. So to answer that question, there's not one specific bill that that I can name that is going to be beneficial or advantageous for employer or employee. They're all going to be detrimental to both.
Ditto.
Your policy matters.
It does. It does. You have to know what you are voting for. Yeah. You have to know where your elected official stands within your own particular communities. I go to Sacramento often and I'm meeting with our elected officials to say, hey, you want to increase this and you want to tax employers with this, that, and the other. I'm a firm believer that small business is the fabric of this nation. So you're crippling us. And so how about we look at it from this perspective? And so, but you have to get involved. You have to, show up, right? When I go call my elected official, they're like, well, here she comes. Absolutely, she's coming because I got something else I need for you to understand.
Yeah. If I may add to that, that's another ditto, but it is important that we stay up with our elected. I still sit on 2 boards, and I encourage both that we know who our state assembly people are and we talk to them, who our state senators are and we talk to them, who's our congressional representative, who is the U.S. senator. We have the power. Now, let me just go back to something that came from Dr. Jackson's point. Probably more than anybody in this United States, we as African Americans have been the true believers in democracy. We have been the ones who have fought for democracy. What are there 4 amendments to the Constitution that deal with democracy? Yep. And this is why we must stay on top of our electeds, because we want, and that goes back to, in my particular interest of workforce, policies and laws that deal with workforce. But there are other things of entrepreneurship and whatever. Pick your niche, but you have to stay in touch with your electeds. If they don't like it, that's their business. You elected them. They're there to serve you.
And let me just piggyback off of what David said. Get involved in the policy, right? What is the policy that's being created? Let's get past this party situation, right? What is the policy? Because at the end of the day, I don't care if it came from a Republican, I don't care if it came from a Democrat. What is the policy? Instead of acting like 2, gang members, let's focus on the policy, right? Because if we're honest, both of them bring something to the table. Mm-hmm. And so don't just affiliate yourself with someone based off of the party. Look at the policy. Look at what are they talking about? How it's going to impact you? How is it going to impact the community? How is it going to impact the work that you are trying to do, right? And then bring people with you. Bring people with you that support whatever mission and vision that you're talking about that's going to be impactful for within your community.
Thanks. We actually have a question from one of our participants. Tia, can you come off mute and ask your question?
I can. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Hi, Dr. Jackson. Good to see you again. I have two quick questions. The first one is for you, Dr. Jackson, and this is just your input. There's a lot of times there's a saying that desegregation really worked negatively against the Black community, just because it created a sense of having to live up to different standards, especially when we're talking about excellence. I'm not saying that statement is right or wrong, just wondering what your thoughts are about it, because you talk so much about how, we just really excelled in our own spaces and uplifted each other. And we have seen what has happened when we kind of have branched out and now live in this space where all the systems have been really created without us in mind. So that's my first question. And my second one really is to anyone. When we're talking about Black excellence, I mean, I'm a nurse. I have every credential behind my name, can't even fit on a business card, and I'm like you. Is it Vakita? Yes, Mrs. Poindexter. I sit on intentional commissions and boards, but at times, and especially raising my daughter, my son, and those next generations, you hear so much that it's exhausting. It's exhausting not because we don't want to do it, but we constantly sit in a space of thinking we need to prove something. I mean, I feel when I walk into the Council of Black Nurses, I'm already defined as excellence. However, when I walk into another room that's not people that look like me, I do feel like you have to prove yourself. And so where does that struggle stop, or that sense stop, so that our mental health is preserved? So those are my two questions.
Great questions. I'm going to jump in briefly on the one for me, and I hope you all will jump in on this too. I mean, I think this is a great question, and this, I think, is one of the things that's the most debated in my classes, right? And I mean, I do think that there's a point to this, but there's also not a point to this. The first point is that yes. So for example, things like, I'm a teacher, so things like teaching are stark to me, right? One of the largest areas in which there was a Black middle class was through Black teaching. Of course, after desegregation, integration and integrated schools meant no Black teachers. Like if there were both Black and white students in the classroom, then initially, right off the bat, that also meant white teachers now. And so the number of Black teachers dramatically decreases, and that is a huge hit to the Black middle class. And so, like, for example, my grandmother, who was a teacher in Texas, she had a master's degree in mathematics. When they moved to California during World War II, she wasn't allowed to teach in California because it was an integrated state, not a segregated state. It's sort of that catch-22 there. But so yes, on the one hand, yes, there was a lot of Black excellence in Black spaces. There's a lot of Black excellence not in Black spaces as well. And the one thing you just can't get around is that segregation is a redistribution of rights and resources based on race. And it's just like this conversation we're having about policy. If you're not at, let's just like Vakita said, if you're not at the table, you're a meal. And under segregation, you're a meal. And so there might, of course, we're going to carve out Black excellence because like that's what we do. But you just can't get around that kind of racial redistribution of rights and resources. And so I think that it's an interesting conversation that people have about things were good, or maybe things were good during segregation, but it's also like missing that piece that there's really only so far you can go, because any policy could come around and redistribute what you have then based on that. But again, history is always messy. It's always messy and complex. So I hope ever you guys jump in on this one too.
Let me just say this, Dr. Jackson, your background and mine are very similar. I grew up in segregation. And if you wanted to sit in the back of a bus, if you got on right on 28th Avenue North, and you get to a certain point, you could get you sat in the front, but when you got to a certain point, you moved to the back. If you can go through all that to where you didn't have all of the rights, or really none of them, and you lived in fear,
yeah,
segregation was good. The point that it is things we missed out on. We bought into something of integration because my mother retired early. She was an excellent teacher. And they moved her when they desegregated the teaching thing to a so-called white school from where I went to high school at Pearl. And she just couldn't, that wasn't what she couldn't, but you know why they moved her over there? Because she was the best.
Yep.
That was the only way we could have a Black teacher over with primarily white students. But again, there were things we should have done differently, but no, and I will say H, and you can do the other words. No, we can't look back in terms of looking at desegregation in those terms. And lastly, I know how you feel of having to be in all of those and being better. But one of the things, unfortunately, is that is one of our things in life, is that we will be looked upon that we have to be better. And other groups have faced this as well. But that's sort of one of those burdens. And then there's another thing that I understand how you feel. And how does the so ain't no ways tired. And we have to just keep on saying it. And you will be past that at a certain time. But that is it. Just one last point. I used to think about all the times, because I was in DC every 4 or 5 weeks, and all those planes I've traveled around the world, that even now I don't want to get on anybody's airplane because I had to be working harder and harder and harder. And I was still on these boards. But you know what? It is important, if I knew that other generations behind me, that I had to open up doors in that way. And you're doing the same thing of open up the doors. And I will say one thing, I will pray for you and say, please provide solace. Please give Sister rest.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here as you know, a Black woman to another woman, because I can't see you, Tia. And yeah, yes, 100%, we get tired, 100%, right? And it's okay. And I think the one thing that we have to be able to do is, number one, prioritize self, right? We have to prioritize our mental health. You got to know when to check out, when to have a strategic plan on making sure that you take care of yourself, right? Raising children and everything else. I can so relate to that. Probably more than anybody else on this particular call, for the simple fact that I was raising a son that wasn't expected to live to be 10. I was trying to manage a business, create a business so that I can make sure I had everything under control. You know, had another child that I was still trying to make sure that didn't feel disappointed or let down in the middle of the process. Oh, and I'm trying to make change in the world. But the one person that got lost in that whole process was me. And so what I had to learn is, before I put, you know, when you're on the plane, they say, before you put the mask on to somebody else, you got to put the mask on you first. I had to learn how to put my mask on first in the midst of all of everything that I was doing. So let me encourage you to, it's okay to take time. It's okay to rest. You need to be intentional about your rest. You need to be intentional about rejuvenating your mind. You need to be intentional about making sure that you take care of your mental health, whether it's work, whether it's family, whether it's philanthropic work. You are not going to be the best version of yourself if you are depleted.
Well said.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you both so much. This has been a fantastic conversation. I can't believe we're at time. I just looked up and saw that they're nudging me that we're at time here. I want to thank you both for joining us today. This has been a fantastic conversation, and thank you for sharing your experiences and thoughts this morning. I want to give you just each a few minutes, maybe a minute or two. I see we're at time, but if there's any last parting words you want to say before we turn it back over to the organizers here.
Nikita?
Sure. So again, you know, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be able to share this. But if I can leave you with any final words, and you know, they'll provide you the slides, has all my contact information, has information about how to get on boards, how to get on commissions. I am a firm believer that where we are today, if we do not change the trajectory of what we're doing as far as getting on boards and getting on commissions, right? We have to have a seat at the table. We have been on the menu. We need to get off of the menu. And the only way that we're going to do that is be in rooms where our voices are heard. And so as one of those individuals that was a proponent of passing SB 826, making sure that women had a place on corporate boards, and especially women of color. This is why this is so important for the time that we are in now. So take that information. There's board training. Get into that board training, figure out board governance, and get on some boards and commissions and let your voice be heard, right? Let your voice be heard, because that is what's going to change the trajectory of what we're doing. That is going to change D&I practices. That is going to change racial discrimination within the workplace. That is going to change hiring more, African Americans in these senior corporate positions. And then let me tell you something. When you get there, make sure you bring somebody else with you. Make sure you bring somebody else with you. And if there's not a table, we can go create our own.
And as they say, amen, sister, amen, amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much. Antoine, back to you.
Thank you. I'm like David. I don't want to say anything else because I'm gonna ruin it. I really appreciate the time and the commitment. I know a couple of people have mentioned in the chat about having more sessions like this. And one of the reasons that we had this after Juneteenth is because Juneteenth is more than just one day. Just like Black History Month is more than just one day, 1 month. These conversations will take place beyond June 19th, beyond February, and so forth. So there will be more opportunities that we will have to have. When we were getting together and meeting leading up to this, we were like, yeah, we got to do. I was telling them, I'm reaching out because we're going to do a part 2. So there will be more opportunities to dive deeper into a lot of the conversation around everything, So we appreciate everyone joining us this morning and giving us a little bit of your time, whether it was morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. And we look forward to sharing more information with you, as Marissa mentioned, putting in on YouTube the record, seeing people engage at asking questions even there, where we can get back to you as well. So again, thank you for your time this morning, and have a great rest of your day wherever you are. Thank you, everyone.